Hi, my name is Rebecca Heald and I am your Satchel class tutor for today. Thank you for joining me for today's lesson when I'm going to be talking to you about how you can create positive attitudes and relationships to food with your children. And we're going to talk about how to do this through packed lunches. So I'm going to share my screen with you because I've got a presentation. And here we go. So, as I said, today's lesson is about how to create positive relationships and attitudes to food and how we can do this through school lunches or packed lunches more specifically. But before we do, I just want to talk to you about what you can expect. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. We are then going to go through what the parent's responsibility is when it comes to providing lunches and feeding their children. I'll then talk to you about the child's responsibility and also about what you can include in your packed lunches. So who am I? So as I already said, my name is Rebecca Heald and I am an executive nutritionist. I'm also a food educator and I was previously a secondary school teacher. I'm also a mother to two young boys, Luca and Leo, and of course that is my primary role, and it's also why I'm so passionate about what I'm going to talk to you about today. So when I talk about feeding our children, I often refer to what I call, or not what I call, what Satchel calls the division of responsibility. So this is a framework which we can use in order to help structure the way that we feed our children to encourage them to trust their own bodies. So within this division of responsibility, we as parents have a responsibility and our children have a responsibility. So our responsibility is to decide what foods we are going to offer our children, when we are going to offer them, so at what times throughout the day, and where we're going to offer them. So I would always recommend at the table without any distractions. It's then our child's responsibility to decide whether or not they will eat, because they may choose to eat and they may not. They will then choose how much they want to eat. So whether they want to leave something on their plate or whether they want more food if it is available. So always encourage your children to eat as much as they can when they come to the table, because that is the opportunity, that is the feeding opportunity that you have provided at that time. So our children learn best through our own modelling. So there's no good telling our children to eat in a certain way or not to eat in a certain way. The best way we can teach our children is to show them through our own modelling. So we don't need to be explicit in terms of what children need to eat. We don't need to tell them that they need to make sure that they get their 5 fruits and vegetables a day, etc. Because we show them through demonstration by eating well-balanced meals regularly throughout the day, by sitting at the table, by demonstrating a healthy relationship with food. That is how we are teaching our children, because that is how they learn. So as parents, we must make sure that we ourselves are eating balanced meals, that we are modeling that for our children. We must then provide that structure. So this may look like, for me, for example, in our home, we have breakfast, we have a mid-morning snack, we have lunch, we have an afternoon snack, we have dinner, and then we'll also have supper in the evening. So my children know that that is the structure. They know that they're going to get regularly fed throughout the day at those times. You can be flexible with those times, but I would always recommend that you're as consistent as possible. And then my children know that in between those meal times and those snacks, that all that is available to them is water, or I also give them squash as well. So they're not allowed to eat generally, usually outside of that structure. It's also your opportunity to offer new foods to your children. So very often I will hear parents talk about fussy eaters. Their children are fussy eaters. They will only eat certain foods. So they then get stuck in the cycle of only offering those foods. But by doing so, we are limiting our children's experiences, and we're not encourage them to try new foods, which will, of course, will make them more successful and healthier eaters throughout the rest of their life. So I would always encourage that you continue to offer new foods. Even if your child has refused a certain food in the past, keep offering it, because research shows that sometimes children have to be offered a food upwards of 15 times before they will even entertain it. They have to see it, they have to smell it, they have to see it lots of times sometimes. And this is absolutely normal and it is okay. Now, of course, you do not want to be offering new foods on their own. You want to offer them alongside other foods that you know that your children will enjoy, because this will increase the chance that they are going to try these new foods. And it also means that if they don't, they're not going to leave the table, or they're not going to leave all of their packed lunch and be hungry. Okay, it's our job also to trust our children. So you may have learned as a child yourself that you need to finish everything on your plate, but all this does is distract us from our own internal cues. We are born as intuitive eaters. When you think about children as babies, or when you think about babies, they know exactly how much they need to eat and when. But almost immediately, we are telling them not to trust their own cues. We're telling them that we know best. How many times have we tried to feed children by saying, here comes the aeroplane, and their lips are pursed shut because they're telling you they've had enough, they don't want any more. And by trying to force them to do so, we are encouraging them to not trust their own bodies. So you must trust your child to eat. If they need to eat more when they come to the table, that's absolutely fine. Offer them as much as is available. If they don't want to finish everything, again, that's absolutely fine. Trust your child. Once you have prepared and offered the food within your structure, you have done your job. It is not then your job to force your child to eat less or eat more. It's also important that you remain consistent. We're not aiming for perfection here, but we are aiming for consistency. We don't have to do the same thing every single day and be perfect, but it's more the general structure and the general pattern that we're trying to aim for being consistent with. And like I said before, this may mean that you need to reflect on your own beliefs and your own practices. So what beliefs do you have? Do you have the belief that your children need to finish everything on their plate before they have their dessert or before they leave their table? If so, you may want to reflect on this. And I do offer programs to help parents to do this. And as parents, we must not coerce or apply pressure. So like I said before, we must not pressure our children to finish everything on their plate. We must not pressure them to eat more, because this erodes the messages that this erodes the trust in the messages that their bodies are sending them. It's also not our job to restrict. Okay, yes, you should provide structure. So you decide what your children do eat within a structure that you have provided, but we should not restrict. We should not never allow them to have chocolates, crisps, biscuits, etc. We should include these within our structure regularly. So it's not up to us to restrict those, but we must provide routine. We also shouldn't label foods. So don't label foods as good or bad or healthy or unhealthy, or this is better than that, because all that does is it creates a moral attachment to food. And then we feel, this is where the guilt and the shame comes as we grow up. We begin to see certain foods as better than others to eat. So then when we eat the bad foods, we feel bad. And it really does affect our self-esteem and our own body image as well. It can really create a negative body image. So please make sure that you're not labeling foods and telling our children that certain things are good or bad. Yes, we can talk about how some foods do provide more nutrients than others, but don't try and demonize, because all this does is give food power. And we want to make sure that our children are growing up with a neutral view of food. So all food should be emotionally equivalent, because this is how we establish a healthy foundation. We also must not demand that our children eat in a certain way or a certain order. If our children want to eat their cookies or their biscuits first in their packed lunch, allow them to do so, because if we do coerce them to eat their sandwich or their fruit first, we are telling them that their sandwich and their fruit is better than their cookie or their crisps. Let your children learn. Studies after studies have shown that when we allow children, when we provide the structure and then we don't restrict what our children eat, they will find their way and they will actually eat everything that they need to do, everything that their body needs. They won't just always. Don't be afraid thinking that your child is always going to choose the cookie or the crisps. They may do initially if you've restricted them for a certain amount of time, but like my children now, they will ask for fruit. They will ask for other foods alongside cookies and crisps. They see them all as having the same moral value within their relationship with food. We also shouldn't be aiming for perfection, like I said. So then it's our children's, it's up to our children. Our children must then decide whether or not they want to eat. They must also decide how much they are going to eat according to their own internal cues. When we are encouraging our children to listen to their own internal cues and trust their bodies, they are going to respect their bodies much, much more as they navigate throughout the world as they grow up. We're living in a society that constantly gives us the messages that we should eat certain things or eat in a certain way, and they erode trust in our own bodies. They make us feel that the way that we eat is linked to our self-worth. But if we can encourage children to actually be more in tune with their bodies, we are going to be encouraging them to be happier and healthier throughout their lives. Also allow them to eat in any order that they please, like I mentioned previously. So our goal is to encourage competent eaters who feel relaxed around food and able to listen to their own internal cues. So like I mentioned before, we live in a world that is bombarded with diet messages, diet culture messages, and it becomes confusing. So we want our children to trust their own bodies, to listen to those internal cues, because then they will be able to feel much more relaxed around food. We also want to teach our children to love and trust our bodies. And by not demonizing foods, by letting them listen to their bodies, we are going to be encouraging this. Now, it may be difficult if you are a parent who yourself has struggled, who yourself has been on and off diets, or who maybe experienced that yourself as a child. So it's always really, really important that you do reflect on your own beliefs and your practices. And maybe you do need to do some work on healing your own relationship with food. So what can we do to involve our children in the process? Now, one thing I want to point out here is that when we are putting foods together, when we're putting meals together, when we're putting packed lunches together, it's your job to decide the what. Don't give the job over to your child. You can give your child options, but ultimately it's your job to decide what your child is eating. But your child can get involved in the process. My children love to cook. My children love to get involved. But of course I am guiding and I am directing that. So for example, my youngest child can get the containers out and ready for me to make their packed lunch. My eldest child can slice the fruit or the vegetables. They can choose the sandwich filling. I usually give them an option. So I'll say, would you like cheese, or would you like jam, or would you like ham in your sandwich? And then they can decide. And also one thing that my children love to do is to help with the planning. So when we go shopping at the weekend, they help me write a list. When we go around the supermarket, they'll pick the things off the list, and often we'll write down the things that they're going to have throughout the week on a blackboard. And that really gives them some ownership without me taking that scaffold down. I'm still in charge, but they're having some ownership of it. So like I said before, we can teach our children through modelling. We can literally scaffold what our children need to do in order to master their own nutrition in the long run. But it cannot be done. We cannot just say to our children, right, okay, you're at a certain age now where you can put together your own lunch. No, it doesn't work like that. Our children need guidance and encouragement from somebody that they know and they trust, you, their parent or their care provider. And Vygotsky put this really great model together, which we call the zone of proximal development, which is how we teach children to learn. It's how through modeling, through demonstration, through showing our children the skills that they need to master, we can take them through the process of mastering those skills themselves. So we take them from what is known to the what is not known. But with this, we must avoid doing too much too soon. So as children get older, you may feel they can handle all the jobs. Like my eldest child, he's almost 11, and he probably could If I left them to it, put a packed lunch together. But it's not usually best to pass those jobs on, because what could happen is they may not put it together in a way that, you know, they may not be putting the what together in a way that is appropriate, and then you're going to have to come in and tell them they've done X, Y, and Z wrong. And that's not always the best way to teach and encourage our children. So you should keep deciding what it is that they need to eat and what is served, okay? And like any other skill, we support our children by slowly taking down the scaffolding. So as your child gets a bit older, they may begin to make their own lunch, but you may want to look over and suggest and be curious. Don't say you shouldn't do this or that, but you can make suggestions and let them come to their own conclusions, but don't leave them completely to it. You need to slowly take down the scaffold so that you can encourage that independence. You also need to make sure that you are mindful of the language that you use with your children. So you must not tell your children that they have to have a piece of fruit, because all you are saying then is that a fruit is a much better option than something else. Yes, of course, you want to keep providing fruits and things, but don't tell them that they must have fruit because it's healthy to do so. Because we want to encourage children, like I said before, to have to see all foods as neutral, so that they can have a positive relationship with them. When they see foods as good or bad, those bad foods almost become like forbidden fruits, something that they try and avoid to have, but then something that they feel that they need to have, okay? And then they may feel guilt and shame when they do have them. This is where where unhealthy relationships with food can develop. You also must not call other foods junk. So don't tell them that they can't have cookies or crisps, etc. And don't call those foods junk, because all you're doing is basically detaching a moral value to that food. You're saying that it has no place or value in their lives, and it does. I like to call these foods, so what you would traditionally call junk food, so more overly processed foods that are higher in sugar and fats, etc. I like to call these play foods or fun foods, because they've got a place in our life. They really, really do. But of course, the majority of the time we want to be focusing on nutritious whole foods, but then from time to time we need to be including these play or these fun foods. And they're absolutely okay. When our children can see that they are just as okay as other foods, they have a place, then we can develop these healthy relationships with food. So all food is good food. And my 7-year-old son that said that to me the other day, and he came home and he's like, all food is good food, mummy. And it really was such an amazing moment, because by doing that, he's not attaching moral value, moral judgment, and he's going to have a healthy relationship with eating and his body. So what should a packed lunch include? So I say keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it, stick to this main simple structure. So have a main, some fruit and veggies, and some sides. Now your main should include a combination, most of the time, don't worry about getting it perfect, but most of the time you should be having some protein, some carbohydrates, and some fats, because that will help your child to stay fuller for longer whilst providing them with everything that they need. So think about a sandwich, or think about crackers and cheese, or a pasta dish. My kids love to have pasta in their packed lunches. Chicken and rice is another favorite in this house, or leftovers. So sometimes we have things like frittata, and my kids love to take them to school the next day in some Tupperware. Perfect. Then, of course, include some fruits and veggies. So keep offering foods and fruits, etc., to our children, and opt for 1 or 2 or even more. And you can include a dip. My children love things like hummus or cheese dips. So things like carrot, celery, or cucumber sticks. Even my kids absolutely love raw broccoli, raw cauliflower, and things like that. They love dipping that in hummus. And if your child doesn't like those right now, keep offering them. Don't worry if they come home in their lunchbox for a while. Just keep offering. Don't feel disappointed. Just keep. Your job is to offer. Your child's then job is whether and how much. Radishes, tomatoes, grapes, apples, pears, anything that your child likes. But get experimental, try different things all the time. Obviously things that are portable, you know, don't stick to the same things all the time, offer different things. And then for sides, again, 1, 2, or even more, depending on your child and their appetite. Things like crisps, breadsticks. Don't be afraid to include biscuits or chocolate bars in your children's pack-up. It's absolutely fine within the context of a balanced, nutritious meal. Yogurts, cheese sticks, granola bars, trail mix, etc. We make crunchy bread. So if I've got bread that's going a little bit stale, I put it in the oven, a bit like when you make breadcrumbs, but we keep them whole. And my kids love to take those to school as well. Now, if it doesn't all get eaten, it's okay. If your child comes home and they've left something in their packed lunch, or maybe they've only eaten their biscuits and their crisps and they haven't ate their sandwich or their main, don't show any disappointment. Don't apply pressure. If it happens regularly, get curious. Why is it that they're not eating certain things? Do they not like them? Have their taste buds changed? Do you need to get more experimental? Maybe they want to try packed lunches for a while. Be curious, ask questions. Maybe not at the time, just say, oh, I noticed you didn't eat X, Y, and Z in your packed lunch. Is everything okay? Are you happy with what you're having? Be curious, because then you're encouraging your children to talk to you about what it is that they may like or what they dislike. What you don't want to do is apply disappointment or pressure, because then they will feel that they need to eat in a certain way to please you. And all that does is lead them to distrusting their own bodies. And also, don't think about foods that you need to take away. Don't ever think you need to take something away from your child's diet. Add foods in instead. If we tell our children that they need to cut back on sweets or biscuits or anything, we begin to create a scarcity mindset. We begin to create this idea that certain foods are on a pedestal. And what happens then? As you probably know yourself, when you're told you can't have something, your brain wants it even more. So rather than saying you can't have this or you can't have that, just maybe add in some other things. If you want to add, if you do feel that your child is having too many biscuits or crisps, etc., maybe you can add something else in as an alternative and see how that goes. But don't tell them they're not allowed the other things. Just experiment and add more variety into your child's diet and experience. So to sum up, it's the parent's role to provide the structure, provide the opportunity for new foods, to provide nutrient variety, to trust their child, and to not restrict. And then it's our child's role to get involved with the preparation, to decide whether they're going to eat, how much they're going to eat. It's also their role to respect your structure, which can take time initially. Again, I do offer guidance and I do offer workshops and programs on this. And it's also up to your child to trust their body. So that's everything from me. If you're interested to learn any more, or you've got any questions whatsoever, here is where you can find me. Follow me on any of the social media platforms, because I'm often sharing tips, hints, and advice for parents, for teachers, and for children themselves as well. Thank you very much for watching me today, and I really do hope to see you again soon. Bye.